Time for another video. I've kind of, this was originally planned to happen just because I made my build better by just swapping to Eye of Winter and doing some other talent stuff. But then the Cast and Freeze nerfs happened, and I wanted to be here to tell you that it doesn't mean your Sorc is bricked. Cast and Freeze is totally fine, assuming, at least you were playing Sorc. I think it's pretty decent, and I'm sure some of the Gimli Legionnaire Cast and Freeze Comet people are finding other ways to cope with their lives. But, I'm actually just spawning a bunch of elemental storms, and elemental storms are one of the main ways I deal damage. But again, still using cast and freeze, this time just with cold snap instead of comet, because comet has too long of a cast time for you to actually have it utilized, and cold snap has a much shorter cast time while still being a very high damage spell. It just unfortunately does not have a lot of the benefits the comet has. As a smaller AoE, it's less likely to refreeze enemies, or maybe can't. Not sure about that. I use something that prevents it from doing ailments because I don't really care. And then also consuming freeze is actually a bit of an issue, CC wise, and the fact that there's a couple really strong talents for when the target's frozen. But anyway, this build's still one bend build. You're just spamming the Eye of Winter, and you still have some mana problems from all your triggers. And then your elemental storms are just gonna pop up, and then your cast and freeze is just gonna carry you. Things. It takes me a while to realize this guy's proximal tangibility, and then I can't do damage to him until I'm close to him. You do need to swap to a different setup really for bosses. That's what I've been doing. Is I've been swapping from cast and freeze to cast on crit. Cast and freeze I just think is really bad for bosses, and you wouldn't want to use it with Comet Storm anyway. And cold snap is just, you do not want to randomly cast it on bosses, right? You can manually cast it. So let's take a look at the build set. So I have Elemental Storm. This does, it says it does, I don't know, 100 damage a tick or something. Every 0.25 seconds, times 4 times 5, which is, fine. I don't think maybe that math, sure. It feels like it does a lot more damage than this because this just shreds enemies. But this is saying that it only does 1,000 damage per use, and I don't have any skill effect duration. I used to have a lot more. I actually had to actually put this in to test it because normally I play with this. So yeah, how much cooldown recovery even does it get? Okay, yeah. Anyway, so with Elemental Storm, this is great. I spawned a bunch of these. They shred bosses, great for playing defensively around because they freeze mobs that are near you and they just do a lot of damage. Like, this is the damage skill I have that doesn't require them to freeze. So I just have this because it can't crit, so it just does 30% more damage. Wonderful. I have it have more area effect because it has kind of small radius, and that just helps since it's primarily used for mapping, or even bosses can just walk out of it accidentally. And what I'm trying to do is have bosses stand in like 4 of them at once, which occurs very often. And as I increase my crit chance, should occur even more, hopefully. I have increased cooldown recovery rate because this has some ICD thing, and so to proc it more, we just need it to come off cooldown more. And then I can put this in for some reason, whereas less cast speed but deals more damage. It's an instant spell, so I'm not really sure why I can do that, but sure, I'll take it. Using cast on freeze, cold snap, increase energy. I haven't mapped it out. With cast and freeze comet, there's like a certain breakpoint where if you added the energy gem and another talent, you would get to cast and freeze. Again, I haven't mapped it out. Maybe I will later, but yeah. I'm just making it do 25% more elemental damage. Can't inflict ailments. I almost never notice it inflicting ailments. I don't even know if it's possible for it to. But yeah, so I'm just going to use this because that's just good. I'm using it when target's already frozen. I want to consume it. With Comet, it was nice that it would freeze the surrounding enemies that weren't already frozen. With this, that's okay. They get frozen by Elemental Storm or Winter anyway, and this can just do damage. And I have the Echo. This is debatable. I might remove this. Echoing Cold Snap doesn't do the same thing that Comet would because it doesn't have an inherent benefit because it needs to hit another target that's frozen and shatter them, right? The increased area effect's good, and Cold Snap kind of has a small area effect. So the hope with this is essentially on white mobs that when I proc it, it's kind of like chain procking and hitting another enemy that's frozen near it that otherwise wouldn't have been hit. Which maybe Spell Cascade would be better for that, but yeah. So that's what I'm rocking so far. And then I swap to a cast and crit comet setup when I do a boss with just increased energy and spell echo. I'm using Grim Feast for living and mana regen. I have actual cold snap. I haven't actually used this. Was running without an actual cold snap gem, just the one in Castle Freeze. And I was like, I kind of wish I could cold snap things. So then I added it, and then I haven't used it really. But this is just if there's some mob that cold snap doesn't hit that needs to die and isn't in an elemental storm, then you would just cast this. I haven't really been casting it though. Frost bomb for like exposure and whatnot. Isn't really cooked very hard. I just use it on bosses essentially or rares. I just spam it on them, and then less skill effect duration, so it blows up faster, more exposure, and then I just threw this on here because it's just like 12.5% increased damage or something. But yeah, here's our main button, right? I have winter. I thought this DPS thing is probably like per projectile. I don't know. Frostbolt will actually say it does a lot more DPS than this. I don't believe it. I Winter does a lot of damage, and it inflicts critical weakness, which makes it you way more likely to crit, which is great for spawning your elemental storms. So I have Arcane Surge on here because I haven't done my third Ascendancy for heck's sake. PoE, like I won't talk about Ascendancies right now. It's just stupid. But yeah, ideally I would not have this. I would have some damage one gem on here, or even contribute to freeze build up, but more damage should contribute more to freeze build up, and I want it to do more damage. But Arcane Surge, very nice, and I'm essentially only pressing this button, so it's just great to have since I'm, again, only pressing it. Pierce, so it hits more enemies. 40% less cost. This thing just guzzles your mana. Even at 40% less cost, it's still 100 mana, which is pretty high considering my cold snap from Cast and Freeze is 129 mana. It's just that's tough, right? That's tough. So yeah, I am guzzling mana like a champ. And then I have Arcane Tempo for increased cast speed because you really need to cast it faster. One thing you could do is I was also using Neville Crit here instead of Elemental Focus. But if you were to look here, right, it's more damage to run Elemental Focus. It's just if I ran the other one, it would spawn Elemental Storms. So not really sure which is better. I might replace Spell Echo with a Neville Crit. That's honestly probably better. It's more likely to add more freezes to enemies. So we'll see. It does say any skill you use yourself. It does let me put it in here though. So not too clear on that, but yeah. And then I have Frostwall. Frostwall's a good, boss or rare damage ability. Haven't really gotten used to using it, but if you do use it, you'd want, Ice Crystals of less life. Spell Cascade is good, and then Glaciation is just something I threw in there, but you could throw in something else where you just use this and you just spam this, and then you would just cast it again, and then just keep spamming it. Yeah. The unfortunate thing is, your elemental storms can spawn by hitting it, and if they do, then it might spawn on an off place. But yeah. One important thing to mention with gems is you notice I have, 3 5 links. It's actually pretty easy to get 5 link if you just corrupt your skill gems. Otherwise, I haven't seen a natural like Jeweler's Orb drop, for an actual 5 link, not a lesser, but normal one, and they're worth like 15 exalts or something. So corrupting is definitely a much better way to do it, except if you corrupt your gem, you can't upgrade it anymore with a new skill gem. So you would not want to corrupt something that has high quality. I did that on my first Eye of Winter, and that was a mistake. You would just want to set that aside for later when you naturally get a 5 link to upgrade that one to a 6 link. And then you would just, use this random corrupted one that's the same level or whatever. But yeah, so you can just make a skill gem, apply Lesser Jeweler's Orb to it, and then corrupt it, and has a chance to either 5 link itself, go back down to 2 link, improve quality, whatever. I found it's just great to just 5 link it. And of course, Elemental Storm is based on your level, so that 5 links itself naturally, which is nice. But yeah. Aside from that, skill tree, I haven't ascended the third time. I'm planning to just get Arcane Surge and Force of Will, because those are just really strong. Cast speed would be very greatly appreciated for this build, and so would mana regen. That's good. And then I just have this, so I can spawn a bunch of elemental storms. Most of these nodes don't really matter. Boring elemental damage, just elemental damage you do crit, some max ES and mana regen, some more max ES. I have 10% reduced max life because I have chaos inoculation. Here you just take some of the these blizzard skills. I don't think the other ones are worth it. I don't think I need cold resistance penetration. Maybe later on, and then I'll have the levels to get it. But this thing already applies like minus 15%, and I have default 16% already. So, or sorry, minus like 40 or something. And I have default 16% pen. I don't know what has that much pen except a rare that actually has cold resistance, and even those I haven't noticed them being dying slowly. So I think I'm good. But maybe I'll take pen later. I don't really care about chill magnitude. I think that just makes like mobs attack slower. That's okay. I don't think that's gonna save me. Just some more spell damage. I like this. It's just increased area effect. It does take a little bit reduced damage, but it's a lot of increased area effect. So I might change that since it's reduced damage. Some more energy shield. Up here, this is just a bunch of crit hit chance, a bunch of mana stuff. I was taking this, but I untalented it to get more ES nodes for skill effect duration, just because making your Elemental Storm last longer is pretty nice. Right now, I still have a base of 5 seconds. I had it at 11 seconds for a while, and it feels good, but 5 seconds is, generally what it's okay. It's not necessary that you get anything else. This is still really good. The triggered spells. Elemental Storm's a triggered spell, and then so is your Cast and Freeze, Cold Snap. So this is just making them both deal a bunch more damage, and those are your main, damage dealers, really. And when you're on bosses, Cast and Crit Comet, which also works with this. Right? Bunch more crit chance. Again, a lot of my main damage comes from my Elemental Storm, so I'm kind of okay with reduced crit damage because I really need consistent crits. So yeah. And then I have these, which is why Comet was a lot better than Cold Snap, because you want the target to stay frozen. But Cold Snap still one-shots the white mobs, so it's okay. It's just on bosses you swap off of it. And ideally, I would take this again. Also something I'm talented for ES nodes, but I like this. So, yeah. Next, damage-wise, if I did my third and fourth Ascendancies, I would want Touch the Arcade, because it's just a bunch of increased, not even more increased effective Arcane Surge. So I think this would be multiplicative with Force of Will. Just seems insane. But I think I'm going to get some more ES nodes because I haven't even done my third Ascendancy, so who cares, right? So yeah, I mean, this could be good. I don't know. Who knows? Well, I don't know what I'm going for next. Well, I know I'm going for this damage-wise next, probably, because I'll complete my third Ascendancy when I get a Sanctum Trial. But I may get some more Energy Shield because this 3,000 base is pretty bad. You can do whatever you want on your gear. I obviously chose the Go Chaos Inoculation, max res, scale your energy shield to live with Grim Harvest. I think that's pretty good. But, I had to make some gear sacrifices to do that, right? I don't have as good damage gear as I have had just so I can have better resistances, but that's PoE, really, unless you decide to, toss a bunch of exalts at a piece of gear so you can get perfect gear. And then I wanted to look at what you do against a boss. So here's, this is, I think, a tier 6 map or something. Not really that high, obviously. But you can see once I'm going to a boss, I just am like, all right, it's time to change the build a little bit. It's unfortunate because my Elemental Storms can't spawn over there. So I just deactivate my Grim Feast and my Cast and Freeze, and then activate Cast and Crit, and I put over like the Energy Shield and the X Spell Echo, and then I'm good. And I go fight the boss. This is the first boss I did that with, though, so this is not going to be that insane of a performance. It's a little scared for my life. Obviously, I would have liked to Rune of Power before I did the Comet. Cast on Crit procs quite a lot. I should be popping my Mana Flask way more aggressively here and staying to my Rune of Power. I mean, the boss is still dying at a relatively respectable pace. It's just I could have killed her a lot faster if I'd stayed in like my Rune of Power when the other comets were hitting her and stuff. So yeah, not that bad, but only a tier 6 map, I think. So yeah, I think it's fine if you actually play well. You'll still crazy wreck bosses, and if you use Frostwall especially, you'll still mess them up. But yeah, I like to have Sigil Power on my second weapon. The other attributes don't really matter, just don't level on your Sigil Power, and it will swap you to that second weapon when you use it. And then you should just have every other skill checked to only have weapon 1 essentially. And then that would swap you back to your main weapon whenever you're using it. Whenever you add a new skill gem, it makes it change. But yeah. So if you only have this one, then it will just always swap you back to your main weapon. So you can just sigil power and keep going back to doing stuff. And this gives you at level 16, 14% spell damage per stage. You stack it up relatively fast, and you can have quite a bit of extra spell damage. So it's great for bosses or sometimes rares. I like to place it down before ritual as well. But yeah. All right. I hope that looked good to you guys. Made you believe that your character isn't bricked yet. Though, never say never. They're definitely going to nerf cast on crit if I had to guess on bosses, because it with Comet isn't great. I would say that if they do nerf cast on crit, even if they don't, maybe your ideal rotation when you actually do a boss is have like a bunch of cast speed, and then as soon as you freeze the boss, be in a rune of power and just spam Comet on them. Because Comet just does a bunch of damage. You have to cast it. Like if they're frozen, it's fine. You just cast like 3 Comets and the cold snap, and you've done 40, 50, 60% of the boss's health, depending on your gear. So yeah, I wouldn't be too discouraged. Just don't try and cast Comet if the target's not frozen. You will die. It takes way too long. Anyway, hope this was helpful. Let me know any questions down below.